Welcome to Ship Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we're here for this week's Weekly Reader, the Weekly Reader number 8. And I should start this video off by once again shamelessly promoting my solo channel, my personal channel, to which you will be able to find a pinned comment in the comment section below. Recently I answered a question and Ask Adrian Anything, which was how do I get more into poetry, as well as a question which will be coming up, which is essentially what is the meaning of life. I'm going to do my best to take a crack at that, though you probably shouldn't listen to a guy who makes videos on the internet, no matter what he says might be the meaning of life. Moving on, I posted a poem to Patreon. I'm going to post 2 works of writing to Patreon per month at any level. Anyone who is a patron is open to get those access to those writings. I don't have any tiers about that. But I wanted to get right into things. I was thinking a lot about religion and God and gods and that role in texts, in literature, in life, and how those things perpetuate, and how we wear those things on our sleeves, how those things manifest in daily life, sort of. And I don't know if you're watching this, one thing that doesn't get talked about a lot, because the Abrahamic religions are the preeminent religions of our day. You've got Judaism, you've got Christianity, and you've got Islam. The world is predominantly Christian and Muslim. There are very few Jews in the world. So it gets thrown by the wayside a lot that the Jewish religion does not necessarily even believe in an afterlife. There's a lot of verbiage about being with our fathers, sleeping with the previous generations, things like that. But a lot of the Jewish texts, the Torah, things like that, don't really mention a lot of afterlife type stuff. That is more than not a construct of more modern times than the ancient religions. And this is why secular Judaism is fairly prevalent. This is people who describe themselves as Jewish, but they are not religious. It is, in that way, sort of a spirituality versus a religion. And I was thinking about a video that I saw a long time ago on YouTube, and I was not able to find it. I apologize. I was not able to find it to be able to tell you exactly what it was, but I found it when I was struggling with losing my own religion and looking for answers, and it was someone else's story. Was it Dark Matter? Was it Dark Matter? The story? I don't think it was Dark Matter. But it was a very large video on YouTube at the time. I'm talking 2011-ish. On the first wave of Hitchens acolytes. But this guy was talking about how he lost his religion, how he was questioning things, and he found sort of a mentor through it who described himself as Jewish, but he didn't believe in God. And the guy who was basically losing his religion said, I didn't understand it. I couldn't come to grips with it. I exchanged email after email after email with this guy until I finally got it, because the way he described what he meant was that his concept of the afterlife, his idea of living forever, is how the things that you do during your life affect other people and how you live in their mind after you're gone. So this is to say, the way you live forever is through the good and the bad things that you do that leave an imprint on other people. This is sort of a really, really old school way of looking at things. This is where the idea of heroes come from. You live forever through the actions, the incredible actions that you took in your life. A lot of the ancient religions, I can't remember what the phrase was, but in the Greek religions, you would rather be the lowest of the low while you were alive than a king and be dead, because being dead sucked that much. But one of the ways that you live forever would be through heroic acts. So if our afterlife is the way people remember us, that in a sense, so that if that's our afterlife, is the way people take us with them, in a sense, that makes us the gods of the next generation. This is the way that we are carried on, much in the way. So this is where a lot of the verbiage around your model for God is your father. If you live in there's a lot of that in Fight Club. So this is where a lot of that verbiage comes from. That the way that you think of God is going to be a lot like the way you think of your father figure, which is to say that we are the gods of the next generation. Which in effect, I think that's a fairly standard principle. I think that is more or less the way that people actually live versus the way that they profess that they live. Not to say that there are not people who take their religions extremely seriously, but I think that people act more or less by the pantheon of their predecessors, which they carry around in their mind. I think that is more or less the way we act, which is a very literary type idea. The fact that we are learning from the mistakes of others, that we are carrying forth the victories of previous generations, things like that are the way that the future is molded. And it's one of the ways. So I'm rambling a little bit this time, and I hate it because this is all stuff that I've thought deeply about, but putting it into actual words is a lot more difficult. What I'm trying to say is we all carry a practical pantheon. But a lot of times it is a singular book, a Bible that, for example, the Bible, that shapes the way we think about the actions that we take. So, though we are influenced by a pantheon of gods, previous generations, we judge ourselves through one voice, which, even if you are an atheist and you've lost religion, I think it's difficult to get away from this mode and modality of thinking. We judge ourselves through one voice, and I think it's a way that the Abrahamic strain of religion has infantilized sort of our understanding of human nature. Human nature is varied. Human nature is difficult. This is why literature should not be viewed through a black and white lens. This is why your artists, you don't want Mary Poppins writing your books. You just don't. Mary Poppins doesn't write very compelling literature. Bukowski does, right? There are myriad voices in all of our psyches. But with this lens of modern religion put over everything, we are forced into the understanding of good or bad, right or wrong, nice or evil, things like that, which is, it doesn't help. It doesn't help anyone, ever. It doesn't help anyone. In the religions before the gods, in the religions before, in the ancient religions, when you're looking at an actual pantheon of religions, you got Zeus, you've got Poseidon, you've got all of these gods. Each god had his or her own emotions. None of them were infallible. None of them were infallible. But when you're under this idea of a God that is infallible, anything they say is right, whether it's good or bad. Was it necessarily the best idea to flood the entire world because people were disobeying you? That seems like a bad idea on the surface, but you can't say so if that God is infallible. Versus Zeus screwed up a lot. He messed up a lot of stuff. And you could be favored by Zeus. You could be hated by Zeus. These were whims of his folly. And in this, you had to decide for yourself what was good, what was bad, what was right, what was wrong. But I think what I want to get into here with how this relates to literature is back into Emily Dickinson. For me, the idea of Emily Dickinson's religiosity has been confounding, I think is the best way to put it. Emily Dickinson expresses all of the hallmarks of an independent thinker, all of the hallmarks of what we would consider a contemporary thinker, oftentimes, except for once in a while this stunning type of religiosity that comes through. But when we hold that religiosity in light of the fact that we carry a constant pantheon in our minds of voices, myriad, which influence our decisions, which influence our ways of thinking, which influence the ways that even that we express ourselves, that religion becomes a little more into the forefront, as opposed to this confounding sort of mysterious way of looking at it. So here is poem 1462 from The Complete Emily Dickinson. We knew not that we were to live, nor when we are to die. Our ignorance, our cuirass. We wear mortality as lightly as an option gown, till asked to take it off. By his intrusion, God is known. It is the same with life. By his intrusion, God is known. By his intrusion, God is known. What is this intrusion doing? Asking us to take off that gown, which is our mortality. God's intrusion is saying, hey, time to go. And it is the same with life. That intrusion is the way we know we're alive. Life's intrusion is the way we know that we are alive. This is a stunning recapitulation of the ideas that our religion, the gods that we carry with us, our prior generations, The gods that we carry with us are the voices of the past. It is so if we're going with that model that your father is your model for God, we know a little bit about the relationship that Emily Dickinson had with her parents. Her father was overbearing to her. It is by his intrusion that he was known. And the same is with life. Life, perhaps, being representative of the family in general. It is by their intrusion that they are known as well. This poem is from, presumably, 6 years before the publication of Thus Spake Zarathustra. Thus Spake Zarathustra being, of course, the book which contains Nietzsche's proclamation that God is dead. And is it any wonder that Nietzsche's proclamation that God is dead, God being the Father, God being the voices of previous generations, is it any wonder that that was published in 1885, smack in the middle of what is known as the Second Industrial Revolution? What does the Second Industrial Revolution mean? Well, it's the sequel to the first, right? What was the Industrial Revolution? The Industrial Revolution was a point in time where the entire world changed. Everything was upended. People who used to do craft work and were very valuable were now put by the wayside. Those skills which had been passed down to them by previous generations, that craft which had been taught by the Father, was worthless. Gone. Like that. Gone. And during the Second Industrial Revolution, it was all happening all over again. Everything was breaking down. So the Industrial Revolution broke down the fabric of society, brought everyone towards the city from rural settings. So everything that your father had taught you, everything that his father had taught him, everything which had been good and right and wise for 1,000 generations was worthless. Gone. Poof. And then when everything started settling down again, it all picked back up. The Second Industrial Revolution. In our lifetimes, we can sort of look at this as mid-90s through 03-ish. That computer revolution, right? Where everything was sort of on computers now, and all the information that was available on computers. And then everything stabilized for a little bit until all of a sudden it wasn't just information that was on computers. It was communication that was on computers. It was all of these programs which could simulate things, and you didn't need a room full of mathematicians to simulate them. A little bit of AI going on, right? So there was that second revolution. Anyone who's watching this that is old enough to remember 1990, that's a different world. The Industrial Revolution was a bigger change even than that. And then you've got a second one coming on. So God's dead. Nothing your father could tell you means anything. Because the world is always changing at that point. And God is dead at that point because he is singular. God is dead because he came and killed the pantheon. Had God remained a pantheon, he would be myriad and useful through anything, through any situation. So this is in effect as classic a case of irony as could be. So the reason that idea of God, that the idea of carrying gods with us, which were previous generations, died, is because none of the generations could matter. That happened because the Abrahamic religion came along and was finite in voices, but infinite moving forward, infinite in the afterlife. Which brings me to the definition for the week, which comes out of a Dictionary of Literary and Thematic Terms by Edward Quinn. And the definition I would like to read is the definition of the word pastiche. In literature, a text made up of material from other texts. Traditionally, a disparaging term designed to characterize a work as derivative. Pastiche has assumed a more respectable status with the advent of postmodernism. The specter of postmodernism, as Jordan Peterson would say. Pastiche is now seen, along with parody, as an acknowledgement of intertextuality. Pastiche has reclaimed some definition of goodness because of intertextuality. What is intertextuality? Intertextuality is a myriad of voices being useful. Intertextuality is the way that texts interact with each other. Intertextuality is the way that we interact with many texts. So we are in a world, postmodern world, where many voices are once again useful because the need for many voices is prevalent. So God is dead, but the gods have risen. It is an irony to me that one of the strengths of the Abrahamic religions has been their codified nature. This is to say, one of the strengths of the Abrahamic religions has been the fact that when there is a dispute, you go to a book. You go to a book to solve it. Well, what does the book say? And there is one. Now, there are multiple texts within that book. There are multiple voices within that one book. But it is a book. And the downfall, largely speaking, I'm not here to downplay anyone's religion, but the downfall of that vice grip that any of those books had on cultures before is due to the rise of myriad voices. They say that the internet is where religions go to die. Why? Because there's so many voices, and because there's so many texts available at your fingertips. And that does not necessarily mean text as in word texts. Videos can be texts. Not text, but it is short-sighted to think that a printed book is the only thing that could change someone's mind. So when so many voices are available on the internet, and almost none of them think of things the same way you do, the same way any of us do, our ideas are constantly pitted against and smashed into other ideas. So those codified ideas, those ideas that are not malleable, well, if we're citing Nietzsche, we're citing nihilism. So those codified ideas that are not malleable will not withstand the blow. I hope this meant something. I hope this was not just me rambling for 25 minutes, but that is all that I have for this week. This is the Weekly Reader. I hope to have you back next week for probably more weird ramblings, weird ideas from a guy who speaks into a phone once in a while.